John Kennedy, not the good one, but the bad one, is from Louisiana, and we've had just some of the most just awful quotables from him in the past few years. What saddens me, there's a guy named Gary Chambers that ran for
I remember him.
Congress. Yeah, who's just a brilliant guy. He's a black dude. He was brilliant and tried to run against John Kennedy for Senate, and just didn't do well. But I think Louisiana is one of those places where if black voters were mobilized and if they were empowered in the way that people like Stacey Abrams are working on empowering black voters in Georgia, I want, if there's a potential silver lining that could happen, like, let's start mobilizing some Democratic voters in Louisiana and Alabama and many other places. I think they're absolutely they're disenfranchised.
Yeah. I don't volunteer because I'm not going to Louisiana unless I absolutely have to. I need a very good reason before I'm going to go there. I wanted, since you brought him up, Dara, I wanted to share Gary Chambers' commercial that he had when he ran for Senate against John Kennedy a couple of years ago. It was a great commercial.
They said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." But here in Louisiana and all over the South, Jim Crowe never really left, and the remnants of the Confederacy remain. In 1873, when a black man named P.B.S. Pinchback won a U.S. Senate race, he was never seated. They claimed election fraud. The attacks against black people, our right to vote and participate in this democracy, are methodical. Gerrymandered districts are a byproduct of the Confederacy. Our system isn't broken. It's designed to do exactly what it's doing, which is producing measurable inequity. 1 in 13 Black Americans are deprived of the right to vote. 1 in 9 Black Americans do not have health insurance. 1 in 3 Black children live in poverty. It's time to burn what remains of the Confederacy down. I do believe the South will rise again, but this time it'll be on our terms. I'm Gary Chambers, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate, and I approve this message.
All right, so I wanted to point out that I do really appreciate him targeting not just the problems of the South, but specifically the racism and the anti-Black sentiment that has been pervasive in the South for 160 years now. The Civil War never ended. The Civil War, there was a ceasefire. They're not shooting each other anymore. But the ideals of the Confederate South that target and punish and discriminate against Black people on a wide scale as often as they can has never ended. And it is an issue that we have yet to reckon with. We have yet to confront it, and we keep getting there. It's close, but we never actually finish this. And so, with that topic, John, what do you got to say about this? John, I knew you were going to do this, TJ. What are your opinion on this one, John? I'm curious to know what you got to say.
Dara, TJ loves nothing more than to set up a deeply racial question, especially when we have a Black guest, and then go, John, we want to hear your opinion.
One of my favorite things to do.
My opinion, TJ, is that was such an excellent commercial.
It was. It
More
really
political ads should be exactly like that one, but also, what the fuck was he thinking? That's not how you win Louisiana. It's almost like it's just a waste. Like why?
I think what he was doing is like what Dar was talking about, is that the reason that, because like the Black population in places like South Carolina, Louisiana, Mississippi, massive, like the highest Black populations of the country. Yeah. And I think I think a lot of them are dispirited. Like, why bother going out and vote? And if you want to mobilize, millions of people, that was the only chance he had of winning. Like, you're being a Democrat and running against Foghorn Leghorn, you're still going to lose. And so I think that's what he was going for right there. And unfortunately, he didn't get anywhere. But I hope he runs again for something else, because he seems to have a good future ahead of him. What do you think, Dar?
Excellent.
It's highly doubtful that he had, and I don't know, I don't have the numbers, but it's highly doubtful that he had much support or bolstering from the DNC. They're just not really going to put a whole lot of money into those kinds of races that they don't think are winnable.
Yeah,
their resources are limited, and they're going to put money into races that they think are, seats that they think are flippable. But it would just, I don't know, it would be an interesting experiment to see them actually invest money into two races that maybe don't seem that flippable and just kind of see what happens. Because I feel like all it's going to take is really to light a fire, under a lot of folks in these southern states. The Black populations there are high. They are astronomically high, just like they are in Georgia. And the only difference between Georgia and Louisiana and Alabama and some of these other places is that Black voters are being courted in Georgia. They're being spoken to. They're being told that they have a voice and that they matter. And Black folks in Louisiana have never gotten that message. They're not getting it now, and it's 2024. And that's a really sad thing to me. But Gary Chambers, I follow him on Instagram. He's a brilliant guy, and I think he would have made a great senator. And just to kind of listen to some of the yin yang that comes out of this John Kennedy guy's mouth, and to think that there is no reason that man should have 1 ounce of power. He's an old school segregationist is what he is. In the vein of a Strom Thurmond or Jesse Helms. It's just, and it's in this late hour. It's kind of unconscionable to me.
Yeah, John Kennedy is just embarrassing. I mean, it's just like how he acts, and it's not necessarily. So what?
He's just an unserious person.
He's like a cartoon. Yeah, he's like a cartoon character that's in the Senate and everything. And it's just sad to see. And you're talking about the Black populations in the South. Alabama is a really good example of how the Black vote has been just decimated. There was a few years ago. So Alabama's population, let me get the math right here. The population is, I think, 20 or 30% Black. But they have, say it's 20% Black, and they have 6 congressional districts in Alabama. And they're like, okay, well, your congressional district should match like your representation. So if you're 20% of the population, you should have 20% of the congressional districts. But Alabama has cordoned off every Black person in Indiana essentially into one district, so that there's only one representative instead of cordoning it off fairly where there would be 2. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. Like this Supreme Court, like, you know how racist it's got to be for this Supreme Court to say, all right, this is a clear violation of the Voting Rights Act. And Alabama had the option to have like a nonpartisan body draw up a new map or draw the map themselves. They decided to draw it themselves. And of course they did the same thing, and it was rejected twice by the Supreme Court. And that's the lengths that they go to limit the power of Black voters in that state. And of course, it's been going on ever since the 13th Amendment, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. So I don't know. Oh shit, we got to move on. John, do we want to go to Kamala right now with the economic policy?
Yes. Yeah. So let's get a little wonky here, guys.
Let's do it.
So yesterday, I'm reading the news articles for the day, for the week, trying to come up with what topics we're going to talk about tomorrow. And I see an article, and it's like Kamala Harris to give speech about her detailed economic plans in Pittsburgh. And then I honestly wanted to cover that speech, and then I watched the speech, and it's kind of more of the same of what she's been saying. I was hoping for a little more detailed policy, but let's just cover, from an economic perspective, what her policy is and talk about it, because there are great things that I really, really, really love in there, but I don't know if she's playing the messaging on it correctly or doing the right sorts of things. So her big economic tentpole policies are increasing capital gains tax, which is good. I like that. She wants to provide $25,000 for first-time home buyers, and I think build 3 million new homes with tax incentives for building new homes specifically for new first-time home buyers. So if you build a home in a certain affordability range and it's sold to a first-time home buyer, you get a tax incentive. And so those are excellent. As someone who plans to be a first-time home buyer during the Kamala administration, I'm admittedly biased, but I do like that. She has another large, populist economic policy she is offering a $50,000 tax write-off to small business people who start a small business, which is excellent. I think that is something that I'm actually surprised Republicans haven't just stolen, considering how big of a economic boon that is, a populist message for the working class that you'd think Republicans would usually like to have. My question to you guys, I get a little wonky with the economic policy. I think I look into it even among, content creators a little bit more detailed than, the average person. What have, and because I talked to TJ, I want to hear Dara, what have you heard coming from the Kamala administration? Have you liked it on a policy perspective, and have you liked it on a messaging perspective? Because I do think those are two different questions.
Very true. Very true.
I think, in terms, I'm speaking very broadly. I think a lot of these policy propositions, economic policy propositions, can come off like a little bit of a grab bag, a little goodie bag, philosophy around appealing to voters based on things that are obviously, like you said, you're hoping to be a home buyer during her presidency. So it's not pie in the sky thinking. It's not, it's not irrelevant. But I think that the criticism from a lot of conservatives tends to be, even with student loan forgiveness, which is a really, really important issue to me, considering that I went to Oral Roberts University, which was a private university in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I'm still dealing with massive student loans. But I think a lot of this stuff can come off as, well, we're going to give you this and we're going to give you that and we're going to provide this. And, I don't know that a lot of that necessarily comes off to me as necessarily substantive economic policy. It's just, hey, Joe the plumber, this is what I'm going to do for you. And hopefully I'm going to hit on something that feels like it hits close to home. If it's student loans, if it's housing policy, if it's whatever, here's the grab bag of potentially, free stuff, goodies for you. And so I think a little bit of that for me, I don't know, can come off as a bit of, I don't know, dangling the keys in front of voters. But hey, maybe that's all you need to do in order to win votes. I will say, just kind of broadly contrasting economic policies that are presented by particularly Donald Trump right now versus Kamala Harris. If I'm someone who is undecided and if I'm someone who's not terribly well plugged in, one of the things that just strikes me on a really basic level is when you talk about economic policy, anything that Kamala Harris has proposed, tax credits for entrepreneurs, like you said, and she's saying that she's going to continue the student loan debt forgiveness, these efforts that continue to be blocked by Republicans, first-time home buyers and all of this stuff. These policies and these propositions are targeted to people. They're targeted to real people. Social Security, Medicare, preserving Social Security, Medicare, whatever. Anything that I've ever heard the potential Trump administration talk about really has to do with this sort of top-down approach. We're going to provide tax breaks for super wealthy people, and hopefully it'll trickle down. That was a big buzz term during the first Bush presidency. Bush 1, this sort of voodoo economics, trickle-down economics. There is nothing that I've heard Trump propose, really, other than no taxes on tips, that really seems to be aimed or targeted towards individuals.